Hello class. Well, I said in my last video that it would be the last video that I record for both classes simultaneously. I lied to you because I did not speak about chapter 2, which both classes also have in common. This is the last chapter that you both have in common, and I did want to talk a little bit about it, the market system and the circular flow, right? So every country must have some kind of economic system, right? A particular set of institutions, institutional arrangements, and coordinating mechanism for solving the economizing problem. A method of organizing an economy of which the market system and command system are the two general types. Your textbook goes on to kind of describe economic systems on a spectrum from laissez-faire capitalism on one extreme to command and control economies on the other, right? And makes the case that most economies are somewhere in the middle of those two extremes. Laissez-faire economic system, there is no pure laissez-faire capitalist economic system out there, but we have had some examples in history that are pretty close. You would say that Holland probably in the 1600s and 1700s was really close, also known as the Netherlands. Hong Kong, at least until it rejoined China, rejoined mainland China, was the closest example of laissez-faire. The United States, before the Civil War, north of the Mason-Dixon line, could be described as being pretty darn close to laissez-faire as well. In the South, you cannot make that statement when the economic system was based on chattel slavery. That's fundamentally the opposite of laissez-faire in some way, right? Today, the United States would still be fairly high toward, or significantly closer to the laissez-faire capitalist end of things than most other countries. Not the most, but the United States is up there. Command and control, again, we really haven't seen a pure command and control economy because it's really kind of impossible to have one. But the closest we've seen, of course, the Soviet Union, North Korea and Cuba are examples of countries that are pretty close to command and control that are still around today, where government owns all the economic resources out there and makes decisions about allocation and pricing to some degree, right? Most economies, though, fall under some sort of market system that mixes capitalism and some command and control. Western Europe, North America, Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, all these countries lean quite a bit more towards the market side than the command and control side, primarily relying upon private markets to decide what is produced, who's going to produce it, what the price is going to be, and who's going to get it. The textbook in chapter 2 talks about Adam Smith and the invisible hand, and this ties in, of course, very well with this for a couple reasons. In his book, Wealth of Nations, that I talked about in my last video, which was the book that established economics as its own discipline, as its own area of academic study, its own science, right off the bat, he says a couple of things that were profound, that in economics we take for granted today, but no one had really described it. He made the point that why we were seeing the wealth of some nations increasing so much, so fast, which was kind of remarkable that he was able to pick up on that, because the state of national statistics was nothing like today. Statistical procedures were in their infancy at best at the time. But he and some others were able to see something remarkable was happening in some countries, including Great Britain, Holland. It had been happening for a while in the American colonies. He put his book out in 1776. And to lesser extents, you were seeing it in places like France and Germany and the Nordic countries as well. But particularly in Holland, Great Britain, the North American colonies, it was clear that wealth was growing very rapidly. And there was no evidence that mankind had ever seen this pace before. And Adam Smith was right. He was on the crux of a tremendous increasing in wealth, and it would, after his life was over, it would get even more intense. The graph of GDP per capita, which you would say is the wealth of the average person in an economy, throughout all of human measurable history, very slow to almost no increase, right? Over time, over many thousands of years. And then you start to really, to see it kind of pick up in the 1500s and 1600s, start to get a little bit steeper. Not dramatic, but it was getting steeper. And then around 1750s, you start to see it steepen significantly, noticeably. And then in the 1800s, from the 1800s on to today, it's so steep it almost, if you're looking at it on a graph, it almost looks like a wall. It's that steep of an incline. But Adam Smith right off the bat says that it was because of the increase in specialization. Okay, people were focusing in on more and more jobs and getting better at it. What he was saying is we are becoming far more productive, which is a way of saying we can do far more with less than we used to do. And of course that's true. The productivity of the average human being these days, particularly in the advanced countries, is astounding compared to the productivity of people even 200 years before us on average. And particularly if you go back to ancient times, or you're to go back even further to when we're all hunters and gatherers, it's amazing. We're tremendously more productive. Now, we oftentimes, if we're thinking about being productive, and you think about somebody like me who makes my living on a keyboard, essentially, right? Using software programs and IT systems, you might say, well, you're not doing anything tangible, or you're not productive. Well, that's not true. The sort of white-collar workers are profoundly productive. Just using intellectual capital almost exclusively to help produce goods for the economy. Of course, I'm working for myself, but my work, for instance, at my company, it helps all the shareholders of that company, who are probably several hundred thousands of people. It helps all of the other employees at the company, which is probably in the neighborhood of 90,000. And it helps all of our customers, which in some form or another are probably in the hundreds of millions, right? And as you go deeper into the Wealth of Nations, you start to get, Adam Smith starts to get more insight about it. He says, isn't it remarkable that every day I get up and the butcher has food, the grocer has food, the clother has clothes, the tailor can tailor my suit, the construction worker, the construction owner, they're doing their thing, and there's no one organizing this activity. There's no single person or even any single organization that's doing all this economic planning. But yet it happens almost without fail every day. Whatever is needed in the economy is there. And that's the market system, and that's what he described as the invisible hand. He said it's as if an invisible hand is guiding all of this activity, but it's the market mechanisms of pricing and incentivizing individuals all across the economy to engage in certain behaviors. And that is part of what I was talking about in the last video with complex systems. Command and control economies cannot do that. Complex systems and market capitalist-based systems are complex systems, and complex systems are organized from the bottom up. They're never organized from the top down, because you simply can't organize something that complex. I don't care how smart you are. I don't care if you get the 20 smartest guys on the planet, guys and gals on the planet, and you put them in a room. They could not on their own devise a command and control economy that is nearly as productive, nearly as efficient, nearly as accommodating to the largest number of people as a market system, a bottom-up market system can be. So keep that in mind. That's why most of your command and control economies have collapsed, and most of those countries have moved on to other things. And the ones that have not tend to be extraordinarily poor, repressive, and awful. Okay. Now you have lots of very poor countries in the world that are not really command and control, and they're not really capitalist either, but they're not a true attempt at a market system. Well, what's going on there? What's going on there is those countries lack key institutions that must be there for a healthy market system. Okay, so for instance, you're going to need things like you're going to need a good legal system with good enforcement and good adjudication of that legal system for an economy to function well. You've got to have contract law, and you've got to have courts that will do a good job of resolving these sorts of disputes. You need a banking and monetary system that most of the people can rely on. You need some intangible things, right? You basically need an ethic where people will transact with strangers without being very fearful. Okay, in parts of sub-Saharan Africa and South America, and some parts of poor Asia, that doesn't exist. People don't trust each other outside their group, right? And there can be lots of reasons for that, and that's one of the things that the economists that specialize in economic growth, that's what they wrestle with, is how do you build these things? It's hard, right? Because in Western Europe, they weren't really so much built as they emerged, okay? And a lot of it was probably chance, very hard to pull apart because nobody sat there and planned out what should all the right institutions look like to build a healthy, functioning capitalistic market system that makes a vast number of people wealthy compared to what people were before, what people are in the poorest parts of the country of the world. Today, no single person sat down and did that. Things were built onto each other, and there were probably historical events that contributed to it. Kind of that butterfly effect, right? And again, complex system. It kind of emerged. A lot of these things came together in the right way, and then once they kind of gained steam, they took off. And then, in some places, you are able to kind of copy some of those things. So, for instance, you would say, post World War II, after World War II, Japan and Germany, these were countries, Germany had, of course, had some aspects of a capitalist system, but they lacked many of the fundamental institutions that you had in, say, Great Britain, and the United States, Australia, New Zealand. Well, part of what was done in the occupation of Germany, at least what we call West Germany, because the Soviets took a chunk of Germany as well and created East Germany. But what was done in Western Germany is those institutions were put in place. Same thing in Japan, which was really a remarkable thing because Japan had zero tradition of your major Western institutions, and during the occupation those were installed and the Japanese just thrived, right? South Korea, those things were installed too. But in all those societies, they did have a lot of the informal institutions that thrive really well when you add these other things. There's significant social cohesion, there was a good education base, all those sort of things, and then you bring in the market institution, you bring in representative government and some of those other institutions, and it just picked up, and it picked up in a hurry. And in no time flat, Germany and Japan were amongst the wealthiest nations on earth and remain there. So let me see, is there anything else that I want to say? I don't think so. Anyways, I hope you all are doing well. We are having some unusually cold weather for this area in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, but I'm sure I have nothing to complain about compared to you all. Anyways, have a great rest of the week, class. Appreciate it.